What is up, YouTube? It's more Millsy. Back at the Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Updates, the show where I update you on the progress of the decks in my main and test boxes. And today we're talking about a deck that's been sitting in the test box for a little bit and unfortunately got taken apart and just got recently put back together. And I feel sorry for taking it apart because once I put it back together, I realized how much I missed and how I wanted to iterate the deck to make it better. That's Caesar, Legion's Emperor. A Mardu 4/4 that says whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, you choose two. We can make two 1/1 red and white soldier creature tokens with haste that are tapped and attacking. We have draw a card and lose a life, where Caesar deals damage equal to the number of creature tokens you control to a target opponent. Caesar is a ton of fun. It's a deck that I covered back to when Fallout came out, and then a deck I tested for a while. The problem that I had with Caesar on my first time around was, unfortunately, it just felt too close to Jetmir. Jetmir is a deck we've talked on the channel a bit about. You can see my brew for it over on the channel. It got released a few weeks ago. And I think my problem was that I realized that Caesar has to function slightly differently than Jetmir because it's just a different deck. Not only do you have a different color, right? Black here with Caesar versus green with Jetmir, but the payoffs are just completely different. I iterated the deck into more of an Aristocrats deck, and I think it functioned, but it lost its punch. I think at the end of the day, this deck needs to punch hard, because otherwise, Caesar is something that's just going to get nuked off the table, and then you're never going to be able to close a game out. I think my goal was, we're going to be a tokens deck. We're going to do tokens things. If we can keep Caesar out and keep using Caesar's ability, great. But otherwise, I want a deck that functions on attacking, making tokens, and just really using these damage dealers and these ETB damage triggers and these attack on damage triggers that we get access to in black that we'll talk about, and just all these other things to just continue getting a stranglehold in the game, even if Caesar isn't out. And when Caesar's out, we get to take advantage of getting more tokens and that big damaged player ability. But as far as token goes, well, we're making tokens. The difference here is because we have black, we have access to just different token makers. Kaya Geist Hunter acts as a doubling season type effect. Her -2 says until end of turn, if one or more tokens will be made under your control, make twice that many instead. This is an ability that works really well with Caesar's ability, of course, because you're going to get 4 that combat just instead of 2. But when the deck is built to make tokens on attack, this means that we can potentially line our board up to make a ton of tokens in one swing, getting us real upside. You do have the option to give a creature death touch on turn. You'll probably only ever use that ability just to continue to have enough -2s with Kaya's to make sure you have them at the right time. But again, it's great for that. We really only have 1 or 2 true doublers, right, in these colors. We have the Mondrak, we have Anointed Procession, and then we have O'Hare Talk as a tripler, but we really don't have those nice green doublers that they have access to. So we have to make sure we have other options access to us. Charismatic Conqueror, to me, is a more fun version of Blind Obedience. It says whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped under opponent's control, they get the choice. They either tap it or give us a 1/1 token with lifelink, and we will make sure to use that token to make our opponents pay. Cabal just got released in OTJ, and it was one of those cards to this deck that just made a ton of sense. When our opponents make tokens for the first time each turn, we get to make a tap copy of that token. And then whenever we make 1 or more tokens, everybody loses 1 and we gain 1. This is one of the key effects that I think the deck picked up, because we want to make tokens so frequently that we can use that everybody lose 1, gain 1 to our benefit. Well, there's one of our doublers we talked about on the right in Mondrak. It's a great doubler, and it does great work here to help us make sure that that Caesar ability could be up to 4 or 8, right, tokens, depending on what we have access to. Lagomos is a card that I think makes a ton of sense. At the start of our combat, we get a 2/1 elemental with trample and haste, and it gets to die on the end step. This feels great because we can always sacrifice it immediately to Caesar's ability to get Caesar's ability to go off. So it kind of works great for that, meaning we don't have to hurt any of the other creatures we have out. And then if we have 5 or more creatures die in a turn, we can just get a free tutor by tapping it, which feels really great. And then Krenko Tin Street Kingpin is another great example of this on-attack strategy. When it attacks, you put a counter on it and make goblins equal to its power. Again, more tokens on the board than you had when you started your combat. And because we're going to put all those triggers on the stack on top of Caesar, that means by the time we get done to Caesar's ability, we have even more tokens to damage our opponents with. Mural feels like an all-star in the deck whenever I've seen her, stopping our opponents from using spells and abilities of artifacts, creatures, and enchantments on our turn, meaning that we can attack, hopefully freely, make the right attacks, and force the wrong blocks for our opponents. And then whenever she attacks, we can make a bunch of soldier tokens, which again is nice when you can do this again on the stack above Caesar to make sure Caesar gets a big threat. Ocelot Pride feels really good in this deck because you have a lot of other things that can gain you life, like Kumbal or creatures that make tokens with lifelink, which means potentially Ocelot Pride doesn't have to attack, but if it has to, you can gain life with it. But at the beginning or end step, if you gain life this turn, we make a cat, and then if we have the City's Blessing, we copy each token that entered the battlefield this turn, which is a killer ability, and you only need to see it go off once for this to be really effective. I have watched this card in both Caesar and Jetmir go off once, and it's taken over a game, especially if we can pair it with other things as well. Fourth Orlingas makes us X/2/2 human knight creature tokens with trample and haste, so some big boys that could come in right away and attack, but also just increase that number of tokens for a fairly cheap mana cost. Temple with Vengeance and Secure the Waves can both make X tokens for their rate, which is really nice, especially when you care about the number of tokens, like something with Caesar's ability. The only plus side of Temple with Vengeance is your opponents can make those elementals, and if you do, you make more of them. I have had a few opponents take that offer and have regret it, because you'll happily take the other elementals to make Caesar's trigger even better. Horn of Gondor might look odd to some people. It comes in as a 3-mana artifact that makes one human soldier token. Then you can pay X. You can pay 3 to make X 1/1 human soldiers, where X is the number of humans control. But you gotta remember, a lot of our creatures are humans. A lot of our creatures do make human. Some of our creatures do make human tokens, and Caesar is a human. So a lot of time you're going to have a decent number of humans. And remember, this Horn of Gondor is going to compound over time as you use its ability. So it's going to lead to just more and more tokens. Prosperous Partnership kind of plays a dual role. It comes in and makes 2 citizens, but you can tap 3 untapped creatures you control to make a treasure. What I love to do with Prosperous Partnership is you may make tokens with other cards that don't come in tapped and attacking, like Caesar's tokens do. And so you may have 5 or 6 tokens laying around that, that don't have haste, but they survive on your opponent's turn. Now you can tap 3 of them, you can tap them in groups of 3 to make treasures and untap with even more mana, right, than you had before. And now you're just, propounding your turns forward as you're getting more and more mana. And then Rabble Rousing is a card that I cut my teeth with in Jetmir, and it feels great here as well. Whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures, you make that many citizen tokens. Again, when this sits on the stack above Caesar, it means that you're going to make a ton of tokens, and by the time you get to Caesar on the stack, you can potentially dome an opponent for a lot of mana. It does have that hideaway option, so if you control 10 or more creatures, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost, which isn't very hard to do in the deck, but I think its first ability is almost the way better of the two, making sure that every combat we're getting more tokens, more ETB damage triggers, and just making sure that we're continuing to step on the gas as we deal things to our opponents. But again, the goal of the deck is to attack. I put Krunko in, then I don't know why I didn't put Krunko in the attack matter section, so that's kind of odd. But at either rate, that's the goal of the deck. The goal is to get a bunch of things on attack so that we can take real advantage of this combat that Caesar needs to use its ability. Sorin Vengeful Bloodform might look odd because it's a planeswalker that doesn't make tokens, but it gives all creatures and planeswalkers we control lifelink, which is massive. It's massive. If you've never gained 25 or 30 life in a combat, it's something that can really set the game apart, because even if an opponent wipe your boards, it buys you that time to rebuild if your opponents are, ahead of us. The other nice thing is we can use his -X to bring a creature back. So this is nice because if we do hit that board wipe or somebody removes a creature, we can bring it back. Sorin can just +1 to ping a player for damage and gain a life. That works really well with Ocelot Pride. But again, Sorin basically is just giving all of our creatures lifelink, and then the benefit is he can reanimate something if need be, and I think that makes it well worth the 4 mana for it. And Nimpa Call just says whenever you attack with 1 or more non-gnome creatures, you put a counter on Nimpa Call and make X gnome artifact creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, where X is the number of counters on Nimpa Call. So Nimpa Call doesn't have to attack for that ability to go off. It's just going to start going off every turn. And then if you have any way to put extra counters on Nimpa Call, the snowball is going to go off even more. But again, turn 1, when you attack, when Olympic calls out, you're getting 1 gnome, and it's just going to keep going from there. Again, bigger and bigger for Caesar. Arabella was a card that I looked at in Duskmourn and went, this feels like it makes sense in Caesar. And what I had to do to make Arabella really work was take out a couple of my token buffing effects, right, where we're buffing tokens in their power and toughness, to make Arabella more effective. It says when Arabella attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control, power 2 or less. I like this because it kind of feels like a great ability to add on top of Caesar, giving you an alternate route to ending the game if Caesar gets destroyed or popped off the table. Now, Arabella can kind of come in and take a real advantage because almost every token we make in this deck is a 1/1, and if we don't buff it up, more than 2, they're all counting for Arabella. That's an attack trigger. That's before we even get to damage, before we even get to any other abilities. Again, put this one on the stack last, before Caesar if Caesar's out, but otherwise last. Let all your other triggers go off first, making tokens, and Arabella's probably just going to dome people for a ton of damage, and we're going to gain a ton of life off of it. Commissar Severine is one of the 2 cards in the deck that, to me, were the signposts of why we want to get into combat. It says whenever it attacks, each opponent loses X life, and we gain loses X life, not we gain, just loses X. Where X is the number of other attacking creatures. Remember that it doesn't say creatures that attacked this turn. It says other attacking creatures. Meaning that, again, if we put this down lower on the stack and let everything go off before it, all those tokens that come in tapped and attacking are considered to be attacking and are going to grow the number for Severina Rain to get bigger and bigger. This pairs really well with Ishin over there on the other side, which is a really key player in this deck because it's going to double any triggered ability of a permanent when you attack. So this is really nice because it's going to double all these attack triggers and have them go off twice, leading for more damage, more benefit. Enduring Courage may look odd, but it's really here for the haste, giving every other creature that comes in +2/+0 in haste. Yes, this might be a non-bow with Arabella, but I think the point is that now every 1/1 that comes in tapped and attacking is now a 3/1. It's no longer a cheap chump blocker. Opponents have to think about it. They have to realize, are they worth not blocking now that they're all 3s, and have to make these harder decisions that are upon them now. The other effect that we talked about with Commissar is Mishra claimed by Gix. This just says whenever you attack, so Mishra doesn't have to attack. Each opponent loses X and we gain X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So again, same thing. Here's this big ability. Lose X, but gain X this time of whatever's attacking. Again, I like Mishra that just like a Nimbicol doesn't need to attack for its ability. It just says whenever you attack, make it happen. Another great whenever you attack trigger there is Warren War Leader, which we can cast with the Offspring, which brings a token copy in of itself, which of course is great for all of our abilities. That token comes in as a 1/1. But you get the option when you attack. Make a rabbit that's coming in, tapped and attacking, or give everything +1/+1. I really love the versatility of this because some combats you really want that extra rabbit, and some combats you really want that buff. Remember, with 2 of them out, that could mean 2 new rabbits, +2/+2, or a combination, right, on every combat. And I think that leads to great success. Probably my favorite card for tokens decks that came out of Duskmourn is Dollmaker's Shop and Porcelain Gallery. I love Toby, and Toby's in the deck, and Toby's a card I really enjoy. But Dollmaker's Shop leads to some huge headaches for our opponents. On the 2-mana side, whenever you attack with 1 or more non-toy creatures at a player, you get a toy creature token. Remember that if you attack 3 players, you're getting 3 toy creature tokens for a 2-mana enchantment. So that's beautiful. And then when we get to 6 mana, you just get the ability to turn all of your creatures into XXs, where X is the number of creatures you control. That's everything. That's not just the ones that are out. That's their base power and toughness. So now, when those 1/1 rabbits come in, they could be huge. And Porcelain Gallery is very good. I've watched a game or 2 end on a Porcelain Gallery. Because if your opponents aren't watching or aren't careful, just a couple 1/1s that go through unblocked can lead to massive damage. Fervent Charge, giving all creatures that attacked +2/+2 until end of turn. Again, great when you can double it with Ishin, but otherwise could just protect some of those tokens that we need to attack in order to trigger Caesar's ability or get things popping. And then Mardu Ascendancy, whenever we have a non-token creature attack, we get a 1/1 red goblin that's tapped and attacking. Every non-token creature we control that attacks gets us a 1/1 goblin, and that means a bigger Caesar trigger, and we can pitch it. We can sacrifice it to give our creatures that little buff, +0/+3. in the event that maybe we see a lot of chump blocks and we want to make sure that they don't die to the combat, but still get their value off. But I think where the deck on my end, where this deck really differs from Jetmir is Jetmir is more of a tempo deck, right? It's looking to get to 9 and in the game, whereas this deck, I think, is looking to take these damage outlets like Commissar or Arabella or Mishra and combine them with ETB and other damage triggers to really make sure that we continue to stranglehold our opponents as we're making all these tokens. Agate Instigator can come in with an offspring copy and has that classic Impact Tremors effect whenever another creature comes in, deal 1 damage to each opponent. A Johnny works really well with our other cards coming in and making a 2/1. So for 2 mana, you're getting a 1/2 and a 2/1. And whenever a cat you control dies, you can exile a Johnny and return him back. Comes back in, and for his 0, which is the card we really care about, you may, for 0 ability, which is the thing we really care about, can make a 2/1 cat warrior creature token. And then if we control a red permanent other than a Johnny, it just deals damage equal to the number of the creatures you control at any target. Not tokens, just creatures. Here's another killer version of that Caesar ability. To just start doming opponents. You get the tokens, now the token's there to help Caesar's ability. And this is one of those things that can just really help with getting, more of these damage sources on board to keep the ball rolling. Mirkwood Bats and Perforos will both deal damage to each opponent when something comes in. So whenever we make a token or something comes in, Mirkwood Bats also is going to each opponent lose a life whenever we sacrifice a token as well. So unfortunately, not when they die, just when we sacrifice them. It can be important for like Caesar's ability, right, where we have to sacrifice a creature to it. But Perforos is great because just every creature coming in is 2 damage to each opponent. In a combat where we're making 5 or 6 tokens, you can start to see where that really lines up. And then a card that's putting great work for me in this deck is Gold Knight Commander. Whenever another creature comes in, creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This is kind of like a Cathar's Crusade, but instead of getting counters, you just get the buff. And this turns a big combat of tokens coming in, even just 3 or 4 of them, into a massive Alpha Strike change for our opponents when our 1/1s start turning into 4/4s and 5/5s. And because the creature coming in is what triggers it, it means the creature that comes in is going to see that benefit, right, and really get it for the purposes of getting into combat. There's Toby, my other Duskmourn pick. Comes in with a 4/4 token, but as long as we have 4 more tokens, now our tokens have flying. And now we can get in even better with our tokens for damage. Coat of Arms can grow all of our tokens for each other creature that share a creature type with it. This is really great. The more tokens we have, they're just going to get bigger and bigger. Yes, Coat of Arms does affect our opponents, but I think most of the time we're not worried about that. City on Fire, tripling the damage that would be dealt to a permanent or player. This is one of those cards that once you see one turn that Caesar has access to a City on Fire, you will fear what Caesar can do. I've seen at least 2 or 3 games end as soon as City of Fire comes down, where you attack 2 players, dome the 3rd player with City on Fire to knock them out, and then the game is in shambles, right, once that combat happens. I love City on Fire, and being able to convoke it out makes it so much easier to get out and stay out. War Leader's Call, another one of those Impact Tremor style abilities, dealing 1 whenever a creature comes in, and we are still playing some buffs. We're still playing the Intangible Virtues and the Flowering of the White Trees just to grow all of our creatures. Same thing with War Leader's Call. Again, Arabella is 1 card in the deck. It's a great card in the deck, but it is only 1 card. So we still want to buff all our tokens to still have that combat prowess, but that combat benefit. But I think it's important to realize that I'm not putting 9 or 10 buff sources in. I'm only putting 4 or 5 because I still want the world where Arabella can be useful most of the time. See it. But I've said it on the show, and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. Although I'm still testing the deck and still running with it, I think there's still things we learn every time we play a deck. And that's always been my premise as a brewer, is that if you want to, you will never stop learning new things about your deck. And as I test the deck, there's a couple kind of pinpoint things that I've learned, which is that damage on ETB is really important. But I wanted to pick damage on ETB effects that have other utility. Perforos is a creature and can become a creature. Agate Instigator gets a 2nd copy of itself. War Leader's Call buffs your things, right? There's a lot of options on things that make other things happen than just the 1 damage, which is why Impact Tremors is not actually in the list, because I'm focused on these other things. I think Impact Tremors should come in. But the problem is I'm running into a logjam of just other good cards that matter for what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to figure out those slots. But I see the ETB damage being really good, and maybe that means that the Tremors needs to come back in. Echoing Assault feels like a card that makes sense on what it does. It gives your tokens menace, and whenever you attack a player, you choose a non-token creature that's attacking that player, and you make a 1/1 copy of it. You sack it instead. This feels really nice because you can get this up to 3 times a combat, right, when you're attacking each player. And it's an effect I feel like is worth it, but 5 mana just seems high for what this deck is trying to do. This wants lower to the ground pieces that you can get down in combinations and just move towards the value. I think if this was 1 or 2 mana less and only went off once per turn on the bottom ability, I think it would be more of a slam dunk to me wanting to put it in. But the 5 mana seems like a cost that just right now I don't see being beneficial. But maybe that changes my mind later when I test it more and I see more what the card does. And then Caretaker's Talent, I think, is a card that seems like a slam dunk, getting you basically a draw every turn. Level 2 lets you make a copy of a token you want. Level 3 gives you the buff. Again, I think Caretaker's Talent makes a ton of sense, but it's the same thing as Impact Tremors, where it's like, what slot do you take out? The deck doesn't do bad on card draw. In fact, because almost every card in the deck makes tokens, card draw doesn't seem to always be your biggest threat. You always seem to be doing pretty well on cards, and so it's one of those things where it's like, I just, again, Caretaker's Talent makes sense, but like, what do you cut for it? And so Tremors and Caretaker's Talent are, at least right now, the 2 cards that make the most sense for me. I'll give you a small spoiler. In Foundation's Jumpstart, we have a new Goblin that deals damage whenever another creature comes in. It's basically an Impact Tremors on a creature, but it also says when you attack, you get a Goblin. And so that's a card I might even be looking to bring in, because it's, again, another one of these effects, but on a creature, and a creature that has an attacking upside. But let's get into our playtests. Let's have some fun. Here we're keeping a 3-lander with Dollmaker's Shop and Gallery, Soul Ring, Mishra, and City on Fire. A great way to ramp ourselves up. I think we're just missing 1 more token generator, and we're probably off to the races. So turn 1 will draw. Tania Field's looking really odd right now, isn't it? We don't have the swamp to turn it into a black source just yet. But I think we'll just go, planes into Soaring and just kind of watch for now and see what we can do to make it even better. There on turn 2, we'll get the Mishra down. This means next turn we should be able to get Caesar down and get the process started. The only problem is I don't have a token to sacrifice yet. And that's what I really want with Caesar. I really don't want to be sacrificing something that isn't a token. Well, there we go. We have 4th Orlangas, right, as an option to make a token. But I think what I'd really want to be doing here is play the Dollmaker Shop. I've got 1, 2, and a floater left. But I think I'm okay with that. What I'd really want to do here is attack with Mishra. Yes, it's only going to get me 1 life, but it's going to get me a toy. And now we're good because we could either save this toy and use it next turn for Caesar to get the process started, or I can use 2 mana to Deadly Dispute it, draw a couple cards, get a treasure, which I think is what I would do after combat. Draw 2, make a treasure, and now I have access to a little bit more mana, and now I've got, I can keep the party going. So next turn, now we've got 6 mana. We've got something like Pitiless Plunder, which seems great, right, as a way to get some death triggers right when things die. But I kind of think it makes sense to Orlangas here. We're going to make 4 of those Human Knights. And the reason I think this makes the most sense here is they have Trample and Haste, and if any of them hit, we get Monarch. But the thing is, I should be able to get 3 toys here. Make sure we attack all players, get 3 toys. I just realized I could have used that for an extra Human Knight, so we'll just we'll do that. We'll get the 3 toys, right? So now we have a ton of creatures. Remember, this is on attack, right? So the way we could stack it is the Gallery goes off first. So now we have all of these coming in. They don't come in attacking, but at least now they're in. And now Mishra's going to deal 6, right? Because we have 6 creatures attacking. But now, next turn, we have the option to either play Caesar and get the party started, or just turn on Porcelain Gallery and be a threat. Now, we also have the option to potentially start getting City on Fire out here. I mean, if these had Vigilance, we could just as easily play a City on Fire right now. But they don't, and that's okay. I think what basically we're going to end up doing is getting into our next turn. Unfortunately, this Tainted Field just still isn't a able to attack for white or black, but that's okay. I mean, I see two different worlds here, right? You can either dump the city on fire, just tapping one of our toys, right? 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8. Move to combat, attack, right? With it is life loss and not damage. So Mishra wouldn't triple, but you know, everybody's gonna lose 8, and then you get into damage and they start tripling. Or I think, which makes more sense, put Caesar down here. Now you've got that ability turned online. You move to combat, you attack with everybody in Mishra, get rid of one of the toys to Caesar's ability, and then if all the toys attack one player, then we can at least still get 2 toys, right, off of Porcelain Gallery. We would get the 2 soldiers off of it's just soldiers, sorry. You'd get the 2 soldiers off of Caesar, and now you're doming somebody for 11. And now all we have to do is protect this board, which we have the flawless maneuver for. And now next turn, we just hard cast the City of Fire. You know, tap a toy to do it. Have the toy be we sack. Make all of this over again. Or let's move 1 card down because we didn't draw the card from that Monarch that one time, or probably the Monarch the turn after. Now you're dominating somebody for in the round of probably 30 once that next ability runs off, and you can kind of see where if this is uninterrupted. Now, if somebody gets rid of Caesar, it's kind of okay because I'm still running wide. I can just, you know, get City on Fire down and just start dealing damage with these that become 6/6s and 3/3s, and you know, now you're still dealing big damage, even though it's not that flashy. But we'll get into playtest number 2 because I think we kind of showed what we wanted to do there. Here we're keeping a 2-lander with Adeline, Intentional Virtue, Ajani, and Clever Concealment for some protection, and Divine Visitation, which can turn tokens into 4/4 angels. So a way to kind of turn them into something good. The 2-lander works because we can get Ajani down there, but I think even better, right, where we can put the Marsh down there and run our way towards potentially having all 3 of our colors. Turn 2, we'll get the planes down and play that Ajani. Make that Cat Warrior. Obviously, we want the Cat Warrior to die so we can flip Ajani, but we don't mind it at this point if we can't get it quite there yet. But I think turn 3, we just play that Adeline and go to combat and attack. I really want that cat to die, so I'm going to attack with it. And then, right, with Adeline, I make all 3 of those 1/1s attacking each player. Probably 1 or 2 of them die on turn 3, but I think it's still probably at least 1, if not 2. But we'll say it's just 1. Now you're racking up tokens, right? We have an option to put Caesar down next turn and get off to the runnings. And we really want this Cat Warrior to die, but if it doesn't die, that's okay. We're still building, and we're building really well. And we draw into Ocelot Pride, which arguably is pretty great, right? Because now we have an option to make more cat tokens that could potentially die. But I think this turn, what makes the most sense is Caesar, right? Attack with these 4, and I'm doing it this way purposefully so that I could try to keep some creatures up to tap for Clever Concealment if need be. But I would go to attack, sack a human, because it's going to be able to attack, right? 3 tokens from Adeline on attack, 2 from Caesar. Now we're dominating somebody for 7 here, and I think it's well worth the damage. You know, Adeline grows and is attacking. The reason I did this was because I believe we would only have 3 of the 4 needed for Clever Concealment, but hey, that's okay. You know, we're still working our way towards that. And I guess we could just not attack with this human, right, and leave it up for the 4 convoke costs for Clever Concealment to protect the board on our opponent's turns, because they're going to start seeing this engine online. This is an engine that could start getting very scary soon, right? Go to 5. Tainted Peak is turned on because of that Swarm. I'm thinking, what, Divine Visitation? So now these humans and these soldiers are coming in as angels, right? Leave one of the humans back to protect me for Clever Concealment. Attack out with the rest of them. You know, right now Adeline's making 4/4 angels. Now Caesar's making angels. Now you have these 4/4s that are now attacking because of Divine Visitation. Now I'm doming somebody for probably 10 or 12 or 13 here. And again, now all we need to do is just, at this point, protect our board, right? Because Divine Visitation is not just going to get out of hand. We're putting, with Adeline and Caesar, we're putting 20 Power of Angels in every turn. And we have this Clever Concealment to protect every non-land permanent we control by just, convoking it out. And we're just in killer shape. On future turn, the Angels have Vigilance, so it keeps Clever Concealment up. But again, at this point, this just goes to show you that with one or two key token makers, you can see how Caesar can just stretch itself out of control if nobody can deal with Caesar or the token makers. In this sense, if I still had since I still have Visitation, I'm okay if somebody gets rid of Caesar, because Adeline's just going to start making the Angels, right? And then Adeline's going to be a problem, and then I can just recast, Caesar when I can. But let me know, what do you think of Caesar down in the comment section below. It's a deck I've had a ton of fun playing. It's a deck that I feel like I'm still figuring out, and I think that's what makes me enjoy it as a deck, is that there's still these things to learn, these ways to iterate, these ways to grow. I think I really like that it's become an attack-focused deck. You're trying to attack, you're trying to deal damage in combat, and you're trying to get these abilities that care about attacking. And so that means in the future, as we see more of them, more cards have an opportunity to come in. But let me know, what do you think of Caesar down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys